You thought you were his person, then he chose her, not because she was better, not because you weren't enough. There's a reason, and it has nothing to do with what you think. It's buried so deep in him, he doesn't even see it himself, but you're about to. Because once you understand what's actually happening in an avoidance mind when he makes that choice, the confusion stops. The self-blame stops. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And you start seeing him clearer than the people who've known him for years, clearer than he sees himself. Stay with me. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why he did it. And that's going to change everything. Before we go further, drop the word clarity in the comments right now. If you have ever been chosen against, if you have ever felt that gut punch of being passed over by someone you loved, type it. Let me know you are here. And if this kind of deep, honest conversation speaks to you, subscribe. Because we go places here that most channels are afraid to touch. Now let us get into it. Number one, he idealizes the new woman while quietly devaluing everything you built together. The moment an avoidant man starts moving toward another woman, something very specific happens inside his mind. He begins to rewrite history, not consciously, not maliciously, but the rewriting happens all the same. And it is one of the most painful things to witness from the outside. You see, the avoidant attachment style is built on a very specific kind of emotional survival strategy. From early in life, often without even realizing it, people with avoidant attachment learned that closeness is dangerous, that needing someone leads to disappointment, that vulnerability gets punished. So the nervous system of an avoidant person is wired, deeply wired, to create distance the moment real intimacy starts to feel overwhelming. And here is where the new woman comes in. She is new, she is unknown, she has not yet seen him at his worst. She has not yet asked him to open up in ways that made him feel cornered. She has not yet represented the threat of true emotional exposure. And because of all that, she feels safe to him, not because she is actually safer, but because she is still at a distance. And distance for an avoidant feels like oxygen. So he starts to build her up in his mind. She becomes everything. She is easygoing. She is uncomplicated. She does not push. She does not need. And as he builds her up, you get quietly torn down, not in an explosive way, not with big dramatic accusations. It happens in small erosions. Suddenly, the things he used to love about you become the things that bothered him. Your emotional depth becomes too much. Your desire for connection becomes clingy. Your conversations about the future become pressure. He is not lying exactly. He genuinely feels these things. But what he is actually experiencing is not a revelation about you. It is a projection of his own fear. The new woman has not triggered his avoidance yet. You have. And in his nervous system, that difference feels like incompatibility, like a sign that you were wrong for each other, like evidence that she is the right one. This is one of the cruelest aspects of being on the receiving end of avoidant behavior. You did nothing wrong. In fact, the closer you got, the more you actually cared, the more threatening you became to his defensive system. Your love was real, and that reality is exactly what scared him away. What you need to understand is that the idealization he is pouring onto the new woman is not sustainable. It never is. The moment real intimacy enters that relationship, the moment she asks for something real, the moment she becomes a full human being with needs and feelings in his world, the same mechanism will activate, the same pattern will emerge, the same slow devaluation will begin. Because it was never about you, it was never about her. It is about him and a pattern that has been running since long before you ever met. Number two, he uses her as an emotional escape hatch, not a genuine connection. This one is hard to hear, but it is one of the most important things you can understand about what is actually happening when an avoidant chooses another woman. He is not choosing her because she is the love of his life. He is choosing her because she represents an exit from the vulnerability that was building between you two, an exit from the emotional labor of being truly known, an exit from the version of himself that was starting to emerge in your presence, the version that scared him. Think about the mechanics of intimacy. Real intimacy requires you to be seen, fully seen. The good parts, yes, but also the uncertain parts, the wounded parts, the parts you are not proud of. And when two people spend real time together, when they go through real experiences, when they have real conflicts and real repairs, that kind of seeing becomes unavoidable. An avoidant person builds their entire inner life around avoiding that exact experience. They want connection. Genuinely they do, but they want it from a safe distance. They want to feel close without actually being exposed. And as a relationship deepens and that exposure becomes more and more inevitable, the internal alarm system starts screaming. And so he finds a hatch, a way out, a new situation that lets him reset the clock back to zero, back to surface level, back to that comfortable early stage where everything is possibility and nothing is real yet. The new woman does not even fully know this is happening. She is experiencing the exciting beginning of something. He is using that beginning as a pressure valve. She is living in what feels like a genuine romantic story. He is using the story to escape a different story that got too real. Now, this is not to say he feels nothing for her. He might. The early stages of avoidant attachment can actually produce intense feelings. The chase, the newness, the not quite having her can feel like love to someone whose nervous system equates distance with desire. But it is not the full love of two people choosing each other in their wholeness. It is the relief of retreat dressed up as romance. And here is the profound emotional truth you need to sit with. You deserved someone who could stay when things got real, who could feel the weight of genuine intimacy and choose to walk into it rather than away from it. The fact that he reached for an escape hatch does not mean you were too much. It means he did not yet have the capacity to receive what you were offering. There is a difference between being too much for someone and being too much for someone who cannot hold anything. You were not the problem. His ceiling was. Number 3, he tells himself a story that makes him the rational one and you the emotional one. This is where things get psychologically layered. Because when an avoidant makes the choice to move toward another woman, he does not experience it as running away. He experiences it as making a clear-headed decision. And the narrative he builds around that decision is specifically designed unconsciously to protect him from guilt and from having to look at his own patterns. In his version of the story, you were the one who was too intense. You were the one who wanted too much too soon. You were the one who could not just enjoy things without overanalyzing everything. He tried. He genuinely tried. But you made it so hard. You needed so much. And so eventually, he had to make the adult decision to be honest with himself about what was and was not working. Listen to how clean that sounds, how reasonable, how almost noble. He is not a man who ran from intimacy. He is a man who had the courage to make a difficult choice rather than stay in something that was not right. This narrative is not just for your benefit. It is primarily for his own. Because if the story were actually accurate, if he could genuinely sit with the truth of what happened, he would have to confront something painful. He would have to see that the problem was not the relationship. The problem was his response to depth, his response to need, his response to being genuinely loved by a real person. And that confrontation requires a level of emotional self-awareness that most avoidants, at least at this stage in their lives, are simply not equipped for. It is not weakness exactly. It is a defense mechanism so old and so deep that it functions completely beneath conscious awareness. So the story he tells positions you as the emotional one, because emotional in his framing means irrational, means excessive, means problematic, and it positions him as the rational one, as the one who is just being honest, as the one who bravely made a choice. The story gives him permission to move forward without examining himself. And moving forward without examining himself is, in fact, the entire point. What you need to hold on to is this. Emotions are not the enemy of clear thinking. They are information. They are data about what matters, what hurts, what we need. Your emotional responses to this relationship were not signs that something was wrong with you. They were signs that you were awake, that you were present, that you were in it. His discomfort with your emotions was not proof of your excess. It was evidence of his own unprocessed interior. The person who calls you too emotional is usually the person most afraid of their own feelings. Number 4, he becomes more present and attentive to her in ways he never quite managed with you. And this one might be the hardest to see from the outside because you watch him step into this new situation and suddenly he is showing up differently. He is texting back faster. He is making plans. He is showing interest. He is doing the things you quietly wished he would do with you. And it feels like a specific and personal betrayal, like evidence that he was capable all along and simply chose not to give it to you. But here is what is actually happening and why this picture is more complicated than it appears. The avoidant nervous system, when it is moving away from one person and toward another, experiences a very specific kind of activation. There is relief in the escape. There is excitement in the new. And for a period of time, that combination produces something that looks a lot like availability. He seems lighter, more open, more engaged, more romantic. This is real. But it is also temporary. And understanding why it is temporary is everything. What you are seeing is not him finally being his true self. What you are seeing is his defense system in a temporarily relaxed state. The threat of genuine intimacy has not yet materialized in the new situation. He has not been seen fully. She has not asked for the kind of closeness that triggers his withdrawal. The relationship is still in that floating, early, nothing is real yet stage that avoidants find genuinely comfortable. So he moves through it with an ease that looks like growth. He reaches out with a warmth that looks like change. He shows up with a consistency that looks like commitment. And for a person on the outside watching, especially someone who experienced his withdrawal firsthand, it is devastating. But you have to understand the architecture of this. You are not watching him become a better partner. You are watching someone who has reset to the beginning of a pattern. And the pattern has a next stage. It always does. The new woman will eventually become real to him. She will eventually have needs. She will eventually want depth. And when she does, the same walls will go up. The same withdrawal will begin. The same story will be told, except this time it will be about her. The availability he is showing her is not a measure of what you were worth. It is a measure of how early she is in a cycle you already completed. You are further along the map than she is. And what looks like him choosing her over you is actually him choosing a beginning over a middle, because middles for an avoidant are where everything gets real. You were in the middle with him and he could not meet you there. That is heartbreaking, genuinely, but it is not about your value. It is about his capacity. Number 5, he keeps a quiet emotional thread connected to you even as he moves forward with her. This is the part that nobody wants to talk about because it complicates the clean narrative of he left and moved on. And it is one of the most confusing, most painful, most misunderstood dynamics in all of avoidant behavior. Even after an avoidant man has moved toward another woman, even after he has made that choice visible and real, there is almost always a thread, a lingering, a presence that does not quite fully leave. It shows up in different ways for different people. Maybe it is a late night message that comes out of nowhere. Maybe it is a social media interaction that seems small but feels deliberate. Maybe it is a moment of reaching out under a thin excuse that you both know is not really the reason for the contact. Maybe it is a mutual friend reporting that he asked about you. Maybe it is nothing as concrete as any of that, and just a feeling you cannot quite shake that he has not actually closed the door. And here is why this happens and why understanding it is so important for your own healing. The avoidant attachment style does not actually want to lose you. It wants to have you at a manageable distance. It wants the connection without the vulnerability of true closeness. It wants to know you are there without having to do the emotional work of being truly present with you. And when he moves toward another woman, part of what that move does for his nervous system is it recreates that distance with you, the distance that paradoxically makes him feel something for you again. This is why avoidants often come back. This is why the person who could not show up when you were together suddenly seems to miss you once there is space. It is not fake. The feeling is real. But the feeling is real in part because the safety of distance has been reestablished. He can feel warmth for you again because you are no longer close enough to activate his defenses. And the thread he keeps connected to you is a safety net. Unconsciously, it is his way of making sure the exit he needs remains available. Because if things do not work out with the new woman, if the pattern completes itself, and she too becomes someone whose realness threatens him, he wants a thread he can follow back to you. This is not cruelty, but it is a form of selfishness that you need to name clearly, because as long as you allow that thread to stay active, as long as you respond to the late messages and interpret the small interactions as signs and hold space for his possible return, You are not healing, you are waiting. And waiting is not the same as living. The healthiest thing you can do with the knowledge of that thread is to recognize it for what it is and make a conscious choice about whether you want to keep holding the other end, because you have that power. He extended the thread, but you decide whether it stays taut or falls away. And here is the deeper truth that lives underneath all 5 of these things. An avoidant man who chooses another woman over you is not making a statement about your worth. He is making a statement about his own limitations. He is choosing the version of connection he can handle over the version of love that was actually available to him. And in that choice, he reveals the exact shape of his wound. Now, you might be wondering what you are supposed to do with all of this. You might be sitting with a mix of clarity and grief and maybe still some love for this person. All of that is allowed. Understanding someone's psychology does not mean you stop feeling things. It means you can feel them without being consumed by the story that it was your fault. Grief is appropriate here. What you had was real, even if it was incomplete, even if it was limited by what he could offer, even if it ended in a way that felt like rejection. The love you brought to that relationship was genuine, and genuine love deserves to be grieved when it does not find the home it was looking for. But grief is not the same as self-blame. And self-blame is what we need to talk about, because it is the thing that keeps most people stuck longest after an experience like this. When someone we love chooses to move toward another person, the mind does something automatic and devastating. It starts auditing us. It goes back through every moment and looks for the thing we did wrong, the thing we said that pushed him away, the way we were too much or not enough, or somehow not quite right in a way we could have corrected if only we had known. This audit feels productive. It feels like we are taking responsibility, like we are being mature, like we are doing the work of understanding what happened. But it is mostly a trap, because the audit assumes that the problem was something we could have fixed. It assumes that if we had just behaved differently, loved differently, been different, the outcome would have been different. And in a relationship with someone whose core wound is around intimacy itself, that assumption is almost certainly false. You could have been calmer. You could have asked for less. You could have made yourself smaller. You could have become easier. And he still would have eventually moved toward distance, because the problem was never the specific request or the specific need or the specific conversation. The problem was intimacy itself. And intimacy does not disappear just because you become more careful with it. The version of you that would have kept him was a version so far from yourself that it would not have been a relationship anymore. It would have been a performance, an endless careful management of your own needs to stay within the limits of what someone else could handle. And that is not love. That is disappearing. You deserve someone who does not make you feel like your love is a problem to be managed. Let us talk about what comes next, because understanding all of this is the beginning, not the destination. And what comes next requires something that sounds simple, but is actually genuinely difficult. It requires reorienting your attention from him to you. Everything we have talked about has been about his psychology, his patterns, his limitations, his choices, and that understanding is valuable. But there is a point where staying focused on him becomes its own kind of avoidance. Avoidance of the harder and more important question, which is, what does this experience tell you about what you need, what you are ready for, and what you will no longer accept? Because here is something worth sitting with honestly. People with secure attachment styles are often drawn to avoidance in ways that have their own psychological logic. There is something familiar in the pull and push of it, something that feels like love because of the intensity, even when the intensity is mostly made of anxiety and longing. And if this dynamic is one you have found yourself in before, with this person or with others before him, then the most important thing you can do is not understand him better. It is to understand that pull better. Why does the distance feel like excitement? Why does the inconsistency feel like passion? Why does the almost having samyan feel more compelling than the ease of being fully chosen? These are not comfortable questions, but they are the questions that lead to something different the next time, and you deserve something different the next time. Real love, secure love, the kind that is built between two people who are both willing to be fully present and fully seen, does not feel like this. It does not produce this kind of ache. It does not require you to constantly audit yourself or earn your place or interpret silence. It feels honestly almost boring in comparison to the high anxiety drama of an avoidant dynamic. At first, until you get used to it, and then it starts to feel like something you cannot believe you ever lived without. Safety, presence, the radical simplicity of being with someone who actually wants to be there. That is what you are building toward, even now, even in the middle of this hurt. You are clearing space for something that can actually hold you. There is one more thing I want to say before we close, and it is perhaps the most important of all. What he did, choosing her, creating distance, keeping that quiet thread, telling himself a story that made his retreat look reasonable, none of that makes him a monster. And holding space for that truth does not mean excusing the pain he caused. Both things can be true at once. He is someone with a real wound that drives real behavior that caused real harm. And he is also a person who has not yet done the work to see himself clearly enough to change. People can be limited and still not be evil. They can hurt us without intending to, without even understanding that they did. The avoidant person is not typically a predator. They are not usually calculating. They are usually someone who is deeply, genuinely afraid of the very thing they also deeply, genuinely want. And that fear runs the show in ways they would be horrified to fully see. Understanding that does not mean you wait for him. It does not mean you hold the door open. It does not mean you make yourself available for the moment when he might be ready. It means you can release the story that you were wronged by a bad person and replace it with a more complicated and ultimately more freeing truth. You were limited by someone who could not yet match the love you were offering. And that is his loss in the most literal possible sense. That is his loss. You are not at the end of a love story. You are at the beginning of a clearer one. You know more about yourself now than you did before. You know more about what you need. You know more about the patterns to watch for. You know more about the difference between someone who wants you and someone who wants you at a safe distance. That knowledge is not nothing. That knowledge is the entire foundation of what comes next. Carry it carefully. Do not rush to the next thing just to escape the feeling of this one. Let yourself feel the weight of it, the real weight of having loved someone and not been met fully. Let that settle into you, not as proof of your inadequacy, but as evidence of your capacity. You are capable of real love. You showed up fully. And the fact that he could not receive it fully does not diminish what you brought. You brought something real, and something real is exactly what you deserve in return. Now go find it.